Inflation in the Eurozone rose in December at the fastest pace since 2013, partly driven by a surge in the cost of oil. Consumer prices were up by 1.1% from a year earlier, nearly double November's 0.6% gain.
Anger at the rising cost of living in Mexico has sparked mass looting. People have taken the law into their own hands, even trying on shoes for size before helping themselves, in protest at a hike in petrol prices of up to 20%. Authorities say a policeman was killed as he tried to stop a robbery at a petrol station. Hundreds of arrests have been made. Tear gas was fired in Peru as police clashed with lorry drivers protesting at road toll charges going up. Residents of northern Lima were also demonstrating at the installation of toll booths on a stretch of road, meaning they have to pay to come and go from their own neighborhood. As tempers flared, arrests were made along the North Pan American Highway.
I usually take my wife to the market. The prices are much different now. 5 kilograms of maize used to go for 5,500 Burundi francs. Now that bag goes for 9,500 francs, almost double. Tomatoes that would cost 300 now cost 1,000. And a kilogram of rice that would cost 1,500 now costs 2,000, depending on the quality and brand.
Since the collapse of the Semliki Bridge, the city of Beni is cut off from the world. All goods coming from Uganda, Tanzania and the port of Mombasa in Kenya must transit through this road. But the bridge's collapse has put an end to trade, and the region could now be facing food shortages. Another road links Beni to Uganda, but it goes through the so-called Triangle of Death, where Ugandan rebels of the Democratic Allied Forces are based. The governor of the North Kivu province said repairing the bridge was crucial to avoid a humanitarian and economic crisis. The collapse didn't come as a surprise for many locals. When he visited in August, President Joseph Kabila said the bridge, which was built under Belgian colonial rule, needed to be renovated.
The United Nations says more than 5 million people in Damascus have not had direct access to fresh water for almost 2 weeks. Public wells have been damaged during fighting in Wadi Barada, a suburban area on the outskirts of the Syrian capital that supplies about 70% of the water to Damascus. Residents have said that water only runs for 3 hours a day and it's no longer sold in supermarkets. In responding to the crisis, the UN has restored a number of wells in and around Damascus, covering roughly a third of residents' daily water needs. The spokesperson stressed that any lack of water is a humanitarian emergency that could lead to waterborne diseases, particularly among children.
Durante a visita de Réveillon, e do lado de fora, a aflição dos parentes. A situação mal a vídeo foi bloqueada. Da penitenciária. Quando chegou, conseguiu sair.
Now, reports have emerged over the last week that refugees have begun returning to the previously decimated Calais refugee camp in France. The site's clearance in October was praised as a huge success at the time by authorities. But now hundreds of people are believed to be making, quote, secret camps around the area.
Problem is just become more invisible. The dismantling of the jungle has actually made things worse. You don't see people. You know why? Because they're scattered everywhere. Before you saw several thousand people in one spot. Now they're everywhere. Have they gone away? No.
See, there's a couple dozen tents here, but we have been speaking to volunteers who have come here who've said in recent weeks there have been as many as 200 people settled here. So we're going to see if we can talk to anybody here now. Pardon? Est-ce qu'on peut parler avec vous, s'il vous plaît?
Don't make picture, please.
Pardon, monsieur? Est-ce qu'on peut parler avec vous, s'il vous plaît? Non? Sorry, we're journalists. Is it okay if we talk to you a little bit?
No journalist.
No journalists?
Yeah.
Is there anybody who can talk to us here?
Yes. We didn't talk journalist.
One of the situations here is that people from here, based in this particular camp, were potentially smuggled to get to the UK where they want to go. And obviously, that's one of the reasons that we've been told these guys are very aggressive and don't want to speak to journalists, and we're going to try to get going. And so why are you here? Do you want to get to the UK?
Yeah.
So you try to get in cars?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
It is run by the smugglers. You pay 500 euros to live in the camp and have a smuggler open the door of a lorry.
One of Osama bin Laden's sons has been added to a U.S. counterterrorism blacklist. The U.S. Department of State labeled Hamza bin Laden as a specially designated global terrorist on Thursday. Individuals on this list are said to pose a serious threat to Americans and U.S. national security. Hamza bin Laden has gone under the radar for the past several years. He appeared in several al-Qaeda videos as a child, but video footage of him as an adult is rare. Hamza bin Laden is now believed to be in his mid-20s. His designation on the list means the U.S. government believes he's actively engaged in terrorism. In 2015, he was officially declared a member of the al-Qaeda terrorist group. And in 2016, he released an audio message calling for Syrian jihadists to take action to liberate Palestine. Some thought that could mean he had risen higher in the terrorist organization. That same year, he released an audio message titled "We Are All Osama" that threatened revenge against the United States after the death of his father.
Your driver's license works in every state, so why doesn't your concealed carry permit? That's the question one U.S. House representative is asking, suggesting that just like your privilege to drive, your Second Amendment right does not disappear when you cross state lines. On the first day of his third term in Congress, Republican Richard Hudson of North Carolina, who is an advisor to Donald Trump's Second Amendment coalition, introduced the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act of 2017. The legislation would permit those with state-issued concealed carry licenses or permits to conceal a handgun in any other state that allows concealed carry. Individuals will be allowed to do so under the condition that the person carrying the gun abides by local laws. It does recognize constitutional carry, the right granted in some states to carry concealed firearms without a permit. Hudson issued a statement saying in part, quote, "Our Second Amendment right doesn't disappear when we cross state lines, and this legislation guarantees that. The Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act of 2017 is a common-sense solution to a problem too many Americans face." The NRA backs Hudson's proposal. The organization indicated that the bill eliminates confusion among varying state laws, but ensures states still have a say over where and how concealed guns can be carried. The bill does keep intact any prohibitions for certain people under federal law already barred from buying or carrying a gun. Hudson first introduced a similar gun bill in 2015. That version had 216 co-sponsors. His new bipartisan proposal, of which he says would amend federal law to help gun owners navigate an often confusing maze of state laws, already has 58 co-sponsors.
North Korea has shown qualitative improvement after a vast number of nuclear and missile tests last year. The United States has said that this shows the need to sustain the pressure to bring back disarmament negotiations. North Korea has made 24 missile tests in the past year, and each one has been more successful than the last. United States officials say there are only two options when it comes to stopping North Korea's growing threat: either negotiate or take direct military action. Both options are fraught with dangers for nearby allies, as neither actions offer certain success.
Last month, India announced that they had successfully tested an Agni-V intercontinental ballistic missile, or ICBM, which could theoretically deliver a nuke to Beijing. A tweet from Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that the accomplishment, quote, makes every Indian proud, end quote. In response, a spokeswoman for China's foreign ministry, Hua Chunying, stressed that the two countries are not rivals for competition, but partners for cooperation. However, the test has been seen by some in China as a provocation. Yuvan Chiu, a professor at Hong Kong University, said, Everyone should be interested in and concerned about India's successful ICBM test, including China, because it's within range of this new missile, and because it, especially of the major Asian countries, understands the dangers of nationalism and its volatility.
The New York Times app has been removed from the Apple Store in China, according to Reuters. This comes after Chinese attempts to block the Times starting in 2012 after articles were published criticizing then Prime Minister Wen Jiabao. Other international publications, including the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal, are reportedly still available. The request by the Chinese authorities to remove our apps is part of their wider attempt to prevent readers in China from accessing independent news coverage, said the New York Times spokeswoman. The newspaper has reportedly asked Apple to reconsider.
According to commentary published by the state-run news agency Xinhua, China slammed U.S. President-elect Donald Trump over his repeated use of Twitter as a platform to conduct international diplomacy. After a series of tweets that depart from long-standing U.S. policies and several controversial comments about China, the article from China's most influential state-run media quoted Madeleine Albright saying that Twitter should not be a tool for foreign policy. The article shows that people in both the U.S. and China now fear that Trump's Twitter diplomacy may damage diplomatic relationships between the two countries.
Now, Jordan's strongly warned U.S. President-elect Donald Trump against moving Washington's embassy in Israel over to Jerusalem, Al-Quds. Now, government spokesman Mohammad Momani said the embassy move will be a red line for Jordan and will inflame the entire Islamic world. And Momani added that Amman will use all possible means to try and prevent such a decision.
Fresh spat between America and Turkey, Ankara has raised a question mark over the US-led coalition's continued use of its Incirlik airbase.
It's thought-provoking that ally countries, especially countries with whom we have worked together in NATO for many years, countries who formed a coalition against Islamic State, do not support the operation Turkish armed forces and the Free Syrian Army have started in Al-Bab, a key town in the fight against ISIL. This causes Turkey to question the Incirlik airbase.
Incirlik Air Base is considered a key NATO base in the Middle East and is the largest nuclear storage site in the region. It deploys 5,000 US military personnel and is mainly used by America's Air Force to fly combat sorties against ISIL in Syria. But as we've just heard, Turkey's now voicing disappointment with its ally, whom it regards as not fully supporting the fight against Islamic State. It's only the latest in a series of blows to US-Turkey relations.
This morning, there was a hearing on Capitol Hill regarding the Russian influence, interference, hacking, whatever you want to call it, in the presidential election. Now, they did not offer any new evidence to prove their point in this hearing, something we expected them to do. They did say that next week they will be offering that evidence. My guess is they push it back again. But, I'm just curious how these secret meetings go, why it takes so long to deliberate this information, why you can't release this information to us. How does it risk anything? You're just telling us and proving to us that Russia did it, but apparently that's something that they can't do.
Senior members of the Republican Party sending a not-so-subtle message to President-elect Donald Trump to support the intelligence community when he takes office.
Putin's up to no good, and he better be stopped. And Mr. President-elect, when you listen to these people, you can be skeptical, but understand they're the best among us, and they're trying to protect us.
Top intelligence officials confirmed 2 different Russian civilian and military intelligence services compromised infrastructure dealing with the election through cyber espionage and data leaking. National Intelligence Director James Clapper says he's convinced the hacks came from the highest level of government in Russia, a country with which Trump has promised to heal relations. On Tuesday evening, Trump defended WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange on Twitter, saying, quote, Julian Assange said a 14-year-old could have hacked Podesta. That's Hillary Clinton's former campaign chairman. Why was DNC so careless? Also said Russians did not give him the info.
Well, apparently the Baltic states are scared to death of Russia. That's what the Pentagon's head of special operations said recently when he visited Lithuania. And we've now learned that over the past few months, the US has sent special forces to provide what the Pentagon calls a persistent presence in the Baltics. They'll help with CIA intelligence gathering operations and will help train local troops too. And there's long been this idea that Russia is seeking to destabilize the former Soviet republic. Republics, but it's kind of gone into overdrive now. The Baltic states have been buying double the defense equipment they were 3 years ago, and their shopping list is set to double again over the next 2 years. And it's something that's really being drummed into public consciousness there. Lithuania has updated its civil defense booklet that it hands out to citizens to include a guide on what to do in the event of a Russian invasion. So these US special forces are being provided to allay concerns in the region, and the concerns that have been made bigger as a result of the election of Donald Trump. During his election campaign, Trump said that the US should only help to protect the European countries that pay their 2% GDP into the NATO kitty, which the Baltic states don't. So they're worried that once Trump becomes president, the US might not be so keen to help bolster their security, especially given that he's promised to mend fences with Russia. So you've got the Pentagon and NATO keen to reassure the Baltics, and the number of troops is really quite illustrative. In the spring, NATO and the US are going to send battalions of around 1,000 troops to each of the Baltic states and Poland. And Britain, France, Canada, Denmark, and Germany are all contributing hundreds of soldiers as well. The Kremlin says that all this is aggressive and provocative. And moreover, Moscow has said that NATO's build-up in the region is really the main barrier to warm relations with Washington. Russia's been bolstering its own security there as well. In the autumn, Moscow moved ballistic missiles over to Kaliningrad and has consistently said that it has every right to conduct military exercises and to move troops and hardware anywhere within its own borders. So it's ratcheting up along that eastern flank, and the result is that within a couple of months we're going to see the largest deployment of troops on Russia's doorstep since the Cold War.
On Thursday, a spokesman for the military has said that the U.S. Army has taken new steps to make it easier for Sikhs, Muslims, and other religious minorities to obtain an approval dress code to dress and groom themselves according to their religious customs while serving in the military. In a memorandum this week, Army Secretary Eric Fanning revised the uniform policy to set appearance standards for people looking for religious accommodations to wear beards, turbans, and headscarves. The memo says that the approved religious accommodation will continue throughout the soldier's career and cannot be revoked or modified unless with the approval of the Army Secretary.
Facial recognition is no longer just sci-fi make-believe popularized by movies like Minority Report. Today, companies like Facebook, Google, and Microsoft routinely collect face prints from their users. Amazon reportedly scans faces in its physical shops. U.S. law enforcement has invested heavily in the controversial technology. Even casinos deploy facial recognition to identify as many faces as possible. And as the use of facial recognition software for commercial purposes grows more common, privacy advocates have developed a way to fight back. Berlin-based artist and technologist Adam Harvey has developed anti-surveillance clothing aimed to confuse facial recognition technology. The Hyperface project features patterns which then appear to have eyes, mouths, and other features that a computer can interpret as a face. Harvey unveiled prototypes of his project at a hacking conference in Hamburg, saying Hyperface clothing is based on, quote, overloading an algorithm with what it wants, oversaturating an area with faces to divert the gaze of the computer vision algorithm, unquote. Now, a report released by the Center on Privacy and Technology at Georgetown Law back in October found facial recognition is almost completely unregulated, and no U.S. states have so far passed comprehensive laws limiting the technology. As a result, roughly 117 million American adults are reportedly included in the FBI's shared facial recognition network.
head and her upper torso are sticking out from under the dash. The rest of her body had gotten smashed under the dash. And she, of course, is screaming, help me, you got to get me out of here. Up here?
New on the night beat, a man recalling the moments he pulled a woman from a burning car near Stone Oak early Friday morning.
And that woman's family now calling the man who visits San Antonio twice a year for business a hero.
Pilar Arias spoke with him today, and he says prayer gave him the strength to rescue her.
Husband, father, fireworks stand manager, humanitarian, and now Scott Love has the title of lifesaver tacked onto his name. He just laid down in his RV early Friday morning before noises coming from outside made him jump out of bed.
And I heard that all too familiar sound of like a pop crash of a vehicle getting crunched.
He says when he saw a car on fire off Highway 281 in Summer Glen Way, he rushed to the scene to help another woman trying to get the driver out.
The front of the vehicle was completely engulfed in flames, and the fuel had sprayed across so that you couldn't get to the driver's side doors. And every time she opened the door, you could hear the girl inside screaming.
It took Scott some time to locate the driver, but once he did, he made a split-second decision.
She's screaming, you can't leave me, I'm burning, I'm burning. In that moment, my exact words were, and it just came out of my mouth, and I didn't think about it. I said, in Jesus' name. And I said it a second time. I said, in Jesus' name. And the moment I said it the second time, she said, my legs are free. And I reached in and I grabbed her under the arms, and she came out like butter.